So it was the fall of 1996. And at the time, I grew up in Bend, Oregon. And a buddy of mine and we went bow hunting out near John Day. We set up a good camp and had everything dialed. And we were going to bow hunt mule deer. And I was the only one that had a tag. So my buddy was just kind of along for the ride. He actually grew up in John Day and knew the area well and knew, a lot of people in the area. So to get into this encounter, we'd been hunting for a day or two, I think. One evening, my friend's cousin came up from town with his girlfriend and a friend of his and that guy's girlfriend too. So that's why I'm not sure who this other person is that you referenced, because it could have been one of those gals. This was 25 years ago, so I don't really remember everybody's name. I know my buddy's cousin's name, but anyway, they came up to camp and we made a nice dinner and we were all sitting around the fire telling stories and stuff. And about 10 o'clock, they left and drove back into John Day. And my friend and I were just, wrapping up camp, doing dishes, getting ready for bed. We had my dog with me. She was a Brittany, a really smart dog, tuned into the woods for sure. Kind of a pain in the butt, kind of one of those dogs. She was a bird hunter, but you'd take her out and she'd always get into something, man. She'd been attacked by all sorts of wild animals and you just never knew with her. Sometimes she'd be gone for 36 hours and then she'd stumble back into camp or whatever, or back on the river. And anyway, so we were getting ready to climb in the tent and we heard this sound that came from across the logging road up on the ridge to our north, probably only a half a mile away at most. And it was just this terrifying, scream, howl, change octaves. It went on for a long time. And the two of us just stared at each other and my dog was, cowering in the tent, which she never did. And, it wasn't a cougar. It wasn't a screech owl. It wasn't any of that stuff. I know what all those animals sound like. I spent a lot of time in the woods and so has my friend, of course, being a logger and a hunter. And, it was an inexplainable sound. And, so my friend and I, we got our we were bow hunting, but, we had some shotguns for grouse and stuff. And so we got our shotguns and we, put them in the tent and, we pretty much stayed up till, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning. Maybe we nodded off. We stayed there, and finished off our hunt. I believe I killed a deer and that was that for that experience there. I don't know. It's funny how, two guys can get to chewing the fat on the road for a couple days and you can kind of rule it all out, right? Like, oh man, it probably wasn't that. It was probably, who knows what it was. Maybe it was somebody playing a prank on us out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know, but I don't know. I guess we had kind of over the course of a couple days convinced ourselves that we didn't need to be scared and we could just kind of do our thing. So that's what we did. The following spring, the girl that I was dating at the time, and this was in my early 20s, I think I was 21. I'm 45 now. So she came with us and it was my same friend, Joe, and her and I, and we just went out there to go, kind of scratch the cabin fever off. And it was a nice, like April or May weekend in Central Oregon. So we were going to go camp and go poke around in the woods for a couple days. It's funny because the same guy and my buddy's cousin from John Day and his girlfriend came up again for dinner one night, maybe the second or third night in camp or something, and just kind of like the same story all over again. They stayed, had dinner. My girlfriend actually was asleep. She slept through everything. She was tired and had been, in the tent sleeping since probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So the rest of us were up and having dinner and chatting around the campfire. And then those guys took off and headed back into John Day. And my girlfriend got up to help me do the dishes and clean up camp and everything. And my friend went and walked outside of camp to go relieve himself. And we heard him empty his handgun. He had a 22 revolver, and he fanned it. Like, it was, you've fanned a revolver before, and like, bam, 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 bam. I'm like, whoa, why is Joe fanning his revolver? So he comes back into camp. He's like, hey, this big animal just jumped out of the creek bed, and it's running across the road right now. And my girlfriend, who grew up on the coast, and when she was a little girl, she had a kind of a weird experience in the woods herself. But anyway, she ran out to the road, and I grabbed, I had a really bright, light in my truck, like a, little spotlight thing that we always used for finding camp spots and, getting people back out of the woods. Oftentimes we'd shoot an elk or whatever late in the afternoon and be in some dark canyon. And this is before GPSs and stuff, kind of. So, you'd go find people and get them back to camp sometimes, just based on the power of a spotlight. So I grab the spotlight and plug it in, and we get the animal in the light, and I mean, that's bright as day. It just cleared the road when I got it, and it ran up on the hillside, and it was just paralleling our camp, just running so fast across this hillside. This, sparsely, I don't know, I mean, I'd call it sparsely timbered, had been thinned out a little bit, and it was just moving so quickly, and it rarely took its eyes off of us, which really crazy to be able to move that fast through the woods and not even watch where you're going.
Yeah.
But that's what it did. And it was unbelievable how quick that thing moved through the woods. When I first got it in the spotlight, and I should tell you that my girlfriend came back into camp and said that it was whistling at her. So then she's with me, and and then Joe's there. We're all watching it run across the hillside. I guess it looked like a Olympic athlete in all, I don't know, a dark suit, all black spandex or something. Its eyes were reflective, but they looked just like the reflective eyes of an elk or a deer or a rabbit or something. They weren't red or, any other color, really. They were just reflective. And yeah, it moved so fast and with such agility, and was, I've been up on that hillside. We went up there the next morning, and I'd walked that hillside before, but just went to go kind of follow the path that it took. Oh, there's stumps and rocks and all sorts of shit in there. Excuse my French, but like how an animal could move that fast in that kind of terrain and not even really ever take its eyes off of us. It's just mind blowing. I don't know, man. It was unbelievable the way the thing moved. My buddy, when he said it jumped out of the creek bed, I can't say that it. He said it was upright, right? It was right in front of him, very close. But yeah, he said it was on 2 legs right out of the gate, and it was always on 2 legs when we saw it. In the morning, we found a single track right where Joe had encountered it in the creek bed. I laid down my Leatherman tool. It was 10 inches long and 6 inches wide, and it was just the front part of the foot. So it had jumped up this embankment, but it was, embedded in the clay soil about a 1/4 inch or so. And I weigh over 200, and I was jumping up and down with my heel, and I couldn't even make an indentation in that soil, in the substrate. So no, nothing else happened on that trip. However, the following fall, we went back to the same camp, my friend Joe and I, and 3 of our buddies joined us. So there's 5 of us in camp. opening day, it was super hot that year. Opening day of archery, I shot a buck, and it was, mid 90s. So we got it back to camp as quickly as we could, and I just started butchering it right away so I could get all the meat on ice and in the cooler. And so I cut it all up, and then I took the carcass. And that year, the meat bees, the yellow jackets, were unbelievable, unreal how many there were. I've never seen anything like it. So the yellow jackets were swarming me while I'm cutting it. I don't know how many times I got stung, a lot. So I took the carcass across the creek and I hung it up in this little grove of trees. And I roped it up and I slung it probably, it was out of my reach. So, I don't know, 9 feet off the ground. And we went back that evening. We, had some dinner and we were kicking around, and same kind of time of night, like right after 10 o'clock, right when we're kind of winding down, we hear this animal walk. We hear these footfalls coming down the hill across from us, other side. So this is not across the logging road that's to our north, but it's in the timber that's to the south of us. And that timbered face goes all the way for miles and miles and miles back there into the Murderers Creek unit. We hear these footfalls. We hear this animal in the grove. He finds the carcass. We're all sitting there listening to it. It's making some odd sounds, grunts and snorts, and like, oh God. And so, our friends, a few of our close friends we had shared our experience with. And, I don't know, how it is. Like, people aren't going to believe you till they actually see something, or, at any rate, so our friends are all just sitting there like, oh my God, is this really happening? Like, there's actually a freaking Sasquatch in our camp right now. Like, this is insane. Are these guys, I don't know. They were just like, whoa. And so we unloaded some guns in the air, and it wasn't easy to scare it off. It didn't run away like, after the first salvo. It took several rounds for it to run off, and we could hear it run off. And so then we all went over, we crossed the creek, single file, shotguns, flashlights in hand, and went over there, and the carcass was on the ground. So we hung it up higher up the tree, like higher up between the grove of trees. So it was, 11 or 12 feet off the ground probably. And we went back to camp, and not 5 minutes later, that thing ran back down there, and it got it out of the tree again. And we scared it off a second time. And we went back over there, and then we hung it as high as we possibly could. And we went back to camp, and it came down, and it got it again. And that time we just sat there and listened to it. And it just did its thing. And I don't know how long we listened to it, a while. And then it took off. It just walked off. And then the next, one of our buddies got in his truck and left, and moved to Alaska. And I've not even spoken to him since. He was a good close friend of ours.